Over the years, I've had a lot of people come up to me and ask me for a variety of reasons, what's the story with this culture, what's the story with that company culture, where I've been currently working at any given time. Hey, can you tell me a little bit more about the culture? I want to know if this is a good culture or a bad culture. So here's what I would suggest. I wouldn't really frame it that way in terms of a good culture versus a bad culture. I totally understand why you're asking, and I really respect that, but with very little exception, or maybe with just one exception, in terms of companies that have bad cultures, I wouldn't really look at it from that point of view. So first, yes, there are some companies that have a bad culture. Companies that have a bad culture are ones that are typically just simply not run well, they're not managed well, they could be deceptive, they could be deceitful, and so on. I think that the best way to look at a company culture, if you are either planning on interviewing or you want to interview or you've gotten your first or second interview there, is really do your best to research how that culture aligns with your personality. Know that that's what hiring managers, HR people, the actual people that you'd be working for are really kind of looking at, whether or not you're going to be the right fit from a company culture perspective. I know that company culture is such a cliched term, but it is so incredibly real and so incredibly important. Sometimes people think that the degree of formality is really sort of the defining aspect of the culture. Not necessarily. Even if there isn't that much structure or formal structure, most companies, all companies, should have some degree of discipline. And that's really important. And then there's going to be companies that, really sort of focus a little bit more on process. They're more process oriented. Even though they want results, they want the process to precede the results. And that's really kind of the type of person that they're looking for. Performance-based cultures, and this could be in various industries, by the way, but performance-based cultures, as the name would kind of suggest, are really based mainly on performance. So not so much about loyalty, not so much about relationships, etc. It doesn't mean that there isn't any relationship building in those companies or loyalty or any of those sort of things that you would need in terms of people skills. But really, at the end of the day, for example, some parts of the finance industry are actually performance cultures. Then we have more of what we call learning cultures, and that seems to be the type of culture that works for me. It doesn't necessarily mean all that much for everyone, but it works for me. So mainly I've worked in large companies. And large companies, the ones that are good large companies, really tend to be learning cultures where they really want you to continue to grow within the organization, and even if you wind up leaving, you're still doing a lot of growing. So the roles that you have and the way in which your roles are sort of set up really are conducive to learning. And there's a lot of different ways in which that can happen, but this is not a management 101 video. Then there are other cultures that are a little bit more nurturing and a little bit more caring. It doesn't mean, once again, that a performance culture or a learning culture is not caring or is not nurturing. But a more nurturing or a more caring culture, to be honest, now this is for you, not me, but that really doesn't work for me all that much, because a caring or nurturing culture tends to be rather low energy and tends to really do everything it can to not put any blame on people. Now, I don't believe in blaming people, but I believe in people needing to take responsibility. So a caring or nurturing culture is too caring or too nurturing. It really doesn't put any responsibility on certain individuals, and it's kind of like, well, the whole team sort of unfortunately missed the mark, something like that. And that's sort of frustrating for me. It could be also very frustrating for you. But it works for some people. Some people like it. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, sometimes people who are lower performing, they do well in caring and nurturing culture. They can't necessarily be criticized all that much, and they tend to have a lot less pressure. Those who are a little bit more interested in performance, a little bit more interested in really doing the absolute best they can, don't mind a little bit of stress, don't mind some pressure now and again, good pressure. They probably would do better in either a performance or a learning culture. Some people who thrive in sort of hectic situations where every day might be like the first day on the job, that's sometimes what a smaller organization or a startup organization would do. I'm not judging these cultures per se. I know I judged a little bit a couple seconds ago, but I'm not necessarily trying to judge these overall. Really, the point of this video is just to kind of share with you various cultures, because in a startup culture or a small company, right or wrong, sometimes that is the best culture that makes the most sense and probably needs to be the culture, at least for the time being. And then there are other cultures that, this can happen in the business world too. It doesn't just have to be, for example, law enforcement, and where authority and order are more important. There are other types of cultures where, it's more what I would call probably hierarchical. So there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of approvals, there's a lot of sign-offs. So I think that if you kind of just take these parameters and you look at that from how do these different types of cultures sort of mesh with my personality, that is probably the better way to look at the whole question of, does this company culture make sense to me? So now you know a much better way of looking at company cultures, and I wish you the best when you get that next job that hopefully is a right fit for you. So send me your comments and questions, and each week you'll get a chance to win a copy of my book. And I'll answer your comments and questions during the QA video for that week.